Welcome back to another video. My name's Carl. I run Tri-Tec Automotive in Swindon. We're a Mercedes and AMG specialist. Today we've got a 212 E-Class in, just an E220 with a 651 engine. I thought it'd just be a good opportunity to show you around it as we carry out the service and just show you some of the common issues that we see with these cars, as this is kind of our day-to-day bread and butter, so to speak. I've probably worked on more of these 651 engines than any other Mercedes engine. They're very common, or they were kind of in this age of car. This is a 2013 E-Class, so between 10 and 15 years ago the 651 was in pretty much everything from A-Class, B-Class, CLA, GLA, C-Class. Pretty sure you could even get it in an S-Class. Probably the most common engine. It is a good engine. It does suffer with some issues over the 646, which was the previous version. Most of the issues it suffers with are emissions, or they're related to the emissions systems, and also due to parts being made of plastic. When they started making the 651, I assume obviously to cut costs and make things easier to produce, they started making a lot of the engine components out of plastic. And it's fine, they work, but when they get to this age of kind of 10 to 15 years old, then these parts start to fail. This one is in for a B service, which is an engine oil change, a pollen filter change, brake fluid as well, and it's also due a gearbox service. So we'll give you an overview of that. It's not going to be a step-by-step guide of how to do it, but it's just going to be a good overview of what to look for and what we do whilst we're servicing these cars. So I've got it in on the ramp, just reset the service light and took the service data from it so we can update the digital service book once we're done. And I'll just show you around the engine bay now and just point out a few things on this particular engine that are worth checking. As we say, 651 engine, covered up by this big plastic cover. Coolant reservoir, first thing to check, remove the cap when it's cold and check for signs of oil in the coolant reservoir. You can dip a rag in. If there's any oil sat on top of the coolant, then more than likely the oil cooler has failed, which we will talk about in a moment. Seals out of place. Engine cover's cracked there just because someone's tried to wrench it off without removing without undoing the little screw here. First glance you can see somebody's done the brake pipes. They're common for corroding. They've not done a particularly nice job of it, but they have done them. Let me get the cover off and I'll show you more items to check. So with the engine cover removed, if you flip it over, see these two little grommets? They actually wear out. You can see that one is worn there on the edge, and that can make the cover vibrate and actually make the engine sound quite loud. So it's worth checking those. For the sake of a few pounds, they can quieten the engine down a lot. Pulled the engine cover off, pulled this front intake duct off, which just unclipped. Air filter is in here, the ECU on top. There are a couple of different types. This is something we see often, this intake pipe. I haven't touched this at all. This is exactly how it's come in. So that just loosened off, so that just needs refitting back on there. Boost pipes, so the orange coloured pipe down there, and then the other big intercorner pipe down here. They split, give you a boost leak, which will result in engine light. A rocker covers leak, which this one looks okay. They fill up the channel in the bottom of the injectors. So if you've got oil in there, especially dark engine oil, chances are it's not from someone accidentally spilling it. It will be the rocker cover that leaks. The rear bolts kind of loosen off over time. The rocker cover starts to leak and then the cover warps. So you can just replace the gasket, but we always do the cover and the gasket because it's quite a lot of work to get to it. You've got to have all the injectors out and move all this loom out of the way, so it's worth just putting a new cover on, do it once and it's done right. Fuel filter sits here in this plastic housing, which also is another common coolant leak. This one looks okay, but if you look down here and you see any signs of coolant around this housing, then it's leaking where it bolts onto the head. Very common issue, done hundreds of them, and there's now a modified part and they bolt on in a slightly different way to stop them from leaking again. Oil filter and oil filter housing, and then the oil cooler that we mentioned, which does actually look like it's leaking at first glance. The oil cooler sits right down in here, attached to the oil filter housing. It's not a proper oil cooler as such. It's not an air-cooled cooler. It's just essentially a heat exchanger. It runs the engine oil and the coolant for it. So they're common for leaking externally and losing oil and dripping onto the floor. They're also common for leaking internally and allowing engine oil into the coolant. Two things to check there. Quite a big job to replace it. All of this has to come off. Vacuum chamber, EGR cooler, a lot of brackets and pipes. you can drop the AC compressor out of the way. Quite a fiddly job and reasonably expensive as well, but also very common. The other thing, well, probably one of the most common items on a 651 is the water pump. So you can check it for play. They don't often have play in, but they leak. This one looks okay. This is the old or the original plastic housing, and if you get one from Mercedes now, it comes with a metal housing. They've updated it. So again, very common. Done hundreds and hundreds of those. Even back when they were under warranty, they were failing. Thermostats leak coolant occasionally, sometimes out of the top where this sensor is. Not so common. The most common coolant leaks by far are the water pump and the coolant housing. Most common oil leaks, rocker cover, oil cooler, and then the sump, which we will show you when we go up in the air. Gearbox oil cooler, this one's nice and dry, but they leak. Again, it's a heat exchanger, so it runs coolant through these pipes, gearbox oil through the metal pipes, and they are known for leaking. So we like to do the cooler and the pipes together to make sure it's done right the first time. Other common issues on these, I've seen turbo actuators fail. They're fairly common, like I say, for boost leaks, both of the intercooler hoses, also the inlet manifold, which you can barely see. The inlet manifold's made of plastic, and it actually, they snapped the first bolt, might be the second bolt, can't remember from memory. One of the bolts near the front, they actually snap the head off the bolt, another common issue, and then they obviously give you a boost leak. You normally notice these things when the DPF starts to block up, because the car won't regen with a boost leak. You start to get limp mode, engine management light, DPF soot content too high. Often we do a smoke test and find that either the inlet manifold's broken or one of these boost pipes is split. They often split on the underside, making them difficult to see. So ideally you need it up on a ramp, up in the air. Parts for this one, as always, genuine Mercedes parts. 9 litres gearbox oil, which should be enough because we're going to drain the torque converter as well. Engine oil filter with a new sump plug washer. Brake fluid, 229.52 engine oil. Gearbox filter that goes inside the sump pan. New seal, new bolts because they're one-time use. New level tube. New washer for the gearbox drain plug. And then the torque converter drain plug, which we will show you because most people don't drain it. But if you don't drain the torque converter, you only get roughly half the oil out of the gearbox. And then new pollen filter, which completes the B service. Now that we've had a good look over the engine bay, noted down anything we found, this is how I like to do it. Take the oil cap off, put a piece of rag there just to stop any debris getting in there, put the oil cap back there, pull the dipstick, and also I've undone the oil filter so it's loose. I'll leave it in place for now, and I'll leave the tool on. You will need a tool to do these filters. This is the Mercedes one, but there's plenty of aftermarket ones available that work. So the reason we've undone the oil filter is so that when we do the sump plug, it will drain out all of the oil from the filter housing. If you leave it done up and then do it afterwards, you'll find there's still half litre of oil or so sat in the housing. So it's just the best way to get all the oil out. And then the reason we've done that with the oil cap and the dipstick is purely as a visual reminder that there is no oil in the engine, or there will be no oil in the engine. So when we go up and drain it and we come back down, it's very easy to get distracted partway through a service, get pulled away for something, especially if you're in a dealership and someone comes out to you to ask you a question. Particularly for me, I'm kind of on my own a lot of the time, so it's easy to get distracted. And as much as you think you will remember, a visual reminder is never a bad idea, because I've seen people do this, drain the oil and then not refill it, and as you can imagine, it's not good. So now I'm going to send it up halfway and carry on the visual inspection of the car. So I've just brought the car up halfway on the ramp just to carry out, or begin to carry out, the visual inspection. At this point we can check tyres, brakes, any visible parts of the suspension, which is mostly the tops of the shock absorbers and the springs on the front. Mercedes are quite common for braking springs across nearly all their models. This one looks pretty good, to be honest. Tyres and brakes, all good from what I can see. Springs are good. One thing to keep an eye on is these metal spring clips on the outside of the caliper. They're only on the rear on this brake setup, they don't have any on the front, but some Mercedes models and some types of calipers also have those spring clips on the front, and they do brake, so it's important to make sure they're in place. They can make the brake pedal feel spongy and make the brakes not work as well as they should if they're missing or broken. So with the car fully up in the air now, we're going to finish the visual inspection, finish checking the tyres, particularly the inner edges, and also check all the way around the rim of the wheel. Mercedes wheels are quite bad for cracking, particularly the bigger ones on the AMG models. We're going to check all of these bushes and ball joints. It looks like it's had new front drop links recently. This cable tie that holds the plastic clip to the strut is broken, so we'll do something with that. Normally at this point, if they've got an oil leak, you will see, because it kind of drains out of these little holes on the under tray, but it doesn't look too bad currently. Same again this side, clip's broken, it's out of place slightly. Coming further back, exhaust flexi often gets damaged on speed bumps. These kind of exhaust clamps that wrap around often corrode and split. The rear prop flexi, same as any rear wheel drive car really, gets cracks around where the bolts go through. I'll spin it around in a second, but this one doesn't look too bad. And then common issue on 204C class and 212E class and some of the older SLKs is the corrosion on the rear subframe. This one, although it looks quite corroded, is not actually that bad. So they get to a point where they completely snap this arm off and this whole bracket snaps off the subframe. And Mercedes were doing them for a long time under warranty, but I believe that is gradually coming to an end. This one doesn't look too bad. Worth checking the flexi hoses, make sure there's no cracks in those. Check the springs. You can put your hand inside the arm and feel if they're broken, or get a small mirror down there. See, the brake pipes have been done, not particularly well. They're not bent to the shape that they should be, but all I can do is advise that because they work and they're not leaking. Under trays are off and it does look nice and dry. Gearbox, all nice and dry as we would expect. And the side of the engine, all good as well. So if the rocker cover leaks, there's a black pipe up here, just behind these two, little plastic pipe, and it's basically the kind of runoff for the rocker cover. So there's a small hole at the back behind the fourth injector, and the oil will run out and then down that pipe, and it will cover this area, but it's actually for the rocker cover. But this is all nice and dry. There is a small amount of oil, and hard to show. There is a small amount of oil towards the front. It looks like the oil cooler is kind of up there. Looks like the oil cooler is just beginning to leak, so we'll advise them of that. Other than that, nice and dry. Sump is nice and dry. So again, plastic sump, these leak, and you just replace the complete thing if it needs it. You need to be careful with the sump plug, don't over tighten it, and be careful when you're undoing it because the sumps can crack. I've had it happen before. Or the fitting, the threaded fitting that the sump plug goes into can start to spin within the plastic housing, and then once it's done that, you'll need a new sump. Be gentle with those. New washer, torque them up every time, and should be all good. A few more things that I've seen go wrong with these just whilst I think about it, which not particularly common, but turbos do fail occasionally. Usually I would say down to lack of maintenance. If you don't change your oil enough, then you're potentially asking for trouble with the turbos. DPF issues, relatively common. I do quite a lot of those. Usually the pressure sensor fails. I would say that's the most common issue, which sits just up behind the airbox. So you can pull the airbox out and you can get to it fairly easily. That fails. And then because the pressure sensor fails and the DPF can't read the pressure, it won't regenerate. And then the more you drive it, it'll just block up the DPF. So this is what I often see, is that DPF issues are often not major problems with the car. They're just that a sensor's failed, or it's got a boost leak, something along those lines. Something that's just enough to stop it from regenerating. And then it will just block the DPF, in which case you need to get it cleaned, or worst case, remove it and get it cleaned and then refit it. Also injectors, I've seen injectors fail, particularly after removing rock covers. No matter how careful you are with them, occasionally if you take them out to do the rock cover, or take them out for any job, and you put them back in, they can fail. They're very, very sensitive. So we kind of pre-warn everyone now that if we have to take the injectors out of one of these, there is the chance they will fail. And we don't slide hammer them. They normally just pull out with your hands. We obviously use new bolts, new washers, grease them all up. For some reason, they're just very, very sensitive. Generally, whilst they're in there and they're left alone, they're not common to fail. It may sound like I've listed almost every part of this engine that is a failure point, but they're really not that bad. And I would say it's just modern diesel engines in general have so much emissions related systems on them, and that is the majority of the issue. Like I said, if you go back to a 646 engine, you don't get as many of these issues. The emissions related systems, and also the fact that a lot of the parts are made of plastic, is what gives you the problem. But they're not a bad engine, and they don't have like an Achilles heel as such. Like, there's not one thing that you would say, oh, 651, like, don't buy that because they, I don't know, they break pistons or the chains snap or whatever. Like, some BMW engines are known for chains snapping, like, constantly. These are pretty good for timing chains. They do need chains eventually, but generally when you're getting like 150 to 200,000 miles, with these you can remove the rock cover and then you can split the chain. This is the thing that Mercedes do on some of their engines. You can split a chain link, join the new chain to the old chain, wind it round, and then join it. Because these are a bit strange to the setup. They're kind of geared from the crank part way up, and then it only runs a small chain at the top, but the chain is at the back between the engine and gearbox. So the issue I come across is people get a chain rattle, and I see it online, people just bang a new tensioner in it, and it's like, it's almost like a band-aid. It'll fix it temporarily, but if the chain is stretched or worn, then it's not actually fixing the problem. You can wind a new chain in, but when you're getting kind of 200,000 miles, there's a very good chance the guides are worn as well. So it is more expensive. It is a lot more expensive, but the only way to do it properly is to remove the engine and like split the engine gearbox, pull the timing cover off, and then replace the guides, the chain, the tensioner, and the cam gears. It's not common. It's not like they fail at low mileage. It's generally always high mileage cars that I see it on. Engine oil is back in. These take 6.5 litres. Oil filter's back in, torqued up, and we've got the brake bleeder on. So we'll bleed the brakes now and then get going on the gearbox service. Brake fluid's all done, so going to service the gearbox next. This is a 722.9 gearbox, which is the 7-speed, which again was in the majority of models of this age. Very common gearbox. This one's got the auxiliary pump here, which we will remove. So what we need to do is just get this exhaust bracket out of the way, just because it makes it a bit easier for putting the pan back in place. So these two 13s, and you can normally just loosen these two 12 mils and just let that hang down slightly. Unclip this wiring around the edge, and then we can drain the pan. You'll only get a small amount of oil out because the green level tube sits inside the pan and holds most of the oil. So what we do is we break that off, which I'll show you how. That'll allow the majority of the oil out, and then we can get to the filter, remove this to get to the torque converter drain plug. So I've taken the drain plug out, and I mean, probably got about a litre of oil out before it stops, and it starts dripping like that. So we need to get the rest of the oil out of the pan, otherwise when you try and lower the pan, it'll just splash everywhere. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. There is actually a special tool that you can put up inside. It's basically like a drift kind of punch, just to knock it out. I don't actually have that. You can use a punch if you can find one the right size, or you can use a pick with just like a kind of 90-degree end on it. And all you want to do is put it up in there and then just twist it like so. You will get oily. It's not quite gone. Struggle. There we go. That little crack was the drain plug. Sorry, the level tube moving out of the way. Have a rag to hand because it does get oily, and now it will drain everything else. There's our gearbox pan off, level tube, which we can just move out of the way. We've got all of our little pan holders off, so we're going to get rid of all these bolts because we've got new ones. We're going to keep, that's all rubbish. We're going to clean those up. We're going to keep that one just because it holds a little bracket. New seal. There's our magnets which catch any particles from the gearbox, and to be honest, that's about what they normally look like. They've always got a kind of build up of this grey sludge on, but that's always, I'd say that's a normal amount considering the mileage, and the gear oil is quite dirty on this. You only really need to be concerned if you see an excessive amount of that kind of grey sludge or actual pieces of metal, but usually if there's an issue with the gearbox, you will see it all throughout the pan. This is kind of what you would expect. I mean, I've done hundreds of these, and it is rare to see one that actually has metal in the pan. So we'll get all this cleaned out, get the filter off, which just pushes into place, I'll try and do that now. It does spill a load more oil out. There we go. Get oil all over my hand. Ideally do that with 2 hands. And there's the valve body. So that's it. Make sure the seal comes out on the old filter and make sure it doesn't stick in the hole. Place a new filter in and we'll clean the pan up and then rebuild it all. So we've got a pan all cleaned up, load of brake cleaner, and then wiped it all out with glue roll just to make it as clean as possible. We don't want any bits going back in there. New level tube just sits in there. So that's how it sets the level. You basically, on these, fill them through the drain plug, you overfill the level, and then you remove the drain plug, and it will, at the right temperature, it will drain out until it gets to the top of this tube. Magnets cleaned up, they can go back in. Got the pump off, so torque converter is just draining now. Get the seal on, get this ready to go back in. Gearbox sump pans back on, new bolts all torqued up, new seal, put the pump back on. We drained the torque converter, new torque converter drain plug, putting the oil in now. Like I say, you fill the oil in these from the drain plug, so you just need an adapter to go in and then a pump to pump it in, and then you overfill it, and shortly we will run the engine until the gearbox gets to the correct temperature, and then remove this and it will drain out to set the level. Just taking this E-Class out for a road test, so it's all done now. B-service, brake fluid and gearbox service all complete. It's a nice car, to be honest, good condition. So hopefully this video has given you a bit of an overview of this OM651 engine and also these W212 E-Class and what to look out for and what to check if you're working on them. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then please subscribe, like the video and drop a comment below. We work on these all the time. I've just had a W204 C-Class dropped off of the same engine. That's got what seems to be the common wheel speed sensor issue, where the dash lights up with ESP, run flat, engine light, ABS, basically brings on a load of warning lights. It has been to another garage and they put an ABS sensor on it, or wheel speed sensor I should say, and it didn't work. But I believe they used an aftermarket sensor, which they don't always work. It's best to stick to genuine electrical parts, or genuine parts in general on any Mercedes, but especially sensors and wheel speed sensors in particular. They need to be genuine, otherwise if they work they don't last very long, but most of the time they won't work at all. So gonna have a look at that now and see if it is a sensor issue or if there's something else going on. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and watch out for the next one.